on the same sentence. Okay, I guess. Okay. I'd feed him to the sharks for saying such a thing. Hey, my name is Kaylee. Thank you for clicking on this video. This is Read, Rant, Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. Today we are going to be talking about Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. If you happen to be familiar with my normal setup, we are not doing that. I'm actually going to be doing my makeup today while I tell you about this book because, truthfully, it is a rough one and I just need to do something with my hands. So I will be telling you the entirety of this book. We will be doing a beat-by-beat, chapter-by-chapter breakdown and just having a good old time. Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. This was her first book that she published after the Haunting and Hunting Adeline duet that was published in 2021 and 2022. First one coming off of that notoriety, we'll say, right? The popularity of those two books. And currently on Goodreads, it is sitting at a 3.91 with 200,000 ratings. So nowhere near as popular as the other two books, but it's something. It sure is something. Before we get into it though, I do have the same 3 disclaimers that I have on all of my videos. The first one being, this video is obviously not for H.D. Carlton, not for friends, fans, family stans, anything of the like. The second is a spoiler warning. Like I said, this will be a beat-by-beat, chapter-by-chapter breakdown of this book. And the third disclaimer is a content or trigger warning. So I will read you the one that is at the beginning of the Kindle Unlimited edition that is provided by the author. This is a dark romance that contains very triggering situations such as graphic violence and gore. Emphasis on the gore, by the way. There's like some body horror stuff. Graphic unaliving, graphic language, self-unaliving ideation, mentions of self-unaliving, depression and anxiety, PTSD, near-death situations, stranded in the middle of the ocean, dub/non-con, heavy emphasis on the non-con there, mentions of incest and child abuse, not depicted, but it is heavily implied, mentions of other forms of abuse, kidnapping, and explicit sexual situations for 18 plus. There are also particular kinks such as autosassinophilia, arousal by risk of being killed. Jesus Christ, I didn't know that had like an actual... I shouldn't be surprised. Oh my god, yeah, definitely that, by the way. The whole getting off to the idea of not being alive anymore, crazy, bro. We'll get into it. Breath play degradation. This is the longest like disclaimer I've ever had to do for this. Breath play, degradation, and sadomasochism. Okay, take all of those very, very seriously. It's a lot. I reviewed Shallow River by H.D. Carlton. I believe that was like her first book that she ever published, or was very, very early in her catalog. That was also incredibly rough. I will link that if you want to listen to it, but that was horrendous. If there's anything that author is good at, it is making you feel really, really bad for young women. Like horrifically terrified for young women. And then just continuing to put them in horrible situations throughout the entirety of the book. So that's like what we're getting into. So I just want you to be mentally prepared. If you are familiar with that review that I did, or if you have read Haunting and Hunting Adeline, it is very, very similar of just continual bad time. But I will try to make light of it. Obviously not of the situations themselves, but just of the book and of the storytelling to keep this not uber depressing. Jump scare. I forgot to tell you guys earlier. Hey, make sure that you vote weekly. If you go to the posts tab on my profile, I post a weekly poll on Saturdays to have you vote for what I review next. This week, you guys voted on a dark romance that I would do, and the monster romance, the Her Soul to Keep by Opal Rain of the Duskwalker Bride series, won by a landslide, so I will be reviewing that next week. Something to look forward to, and make sure that you participate in those polls. That's what they're there for. Oh, and also, all my videos are now on Spotify, so if that's easier for you to listen to, I have the link in the description box below. Okay, back to the intro. All right, I guess I'll get into it. We open our book and the prologue, and we meet our main female character. Her name is Sawyer Bennett, and she's at the airport. She's trying to get on a plane to go to Indonesia. While there, though, she's about to board the plane, and she sees somebody who recognizes her, freaks out, makes a run for it, goes to the gift shop, buys a hat, buys some clothes, changes, goes to the bathroom, like kind of tucks her hair under the hat, to like disguise herself. Goes to the nearest ticket exchange booth thing and pays cash to get a ticket for the next plane out, which happens to be going to Australia. So our girl is off to Australia. The other thing, I don't know if I said it when I first introduced her, she's 28 years old, which is wonderful. I feel like 99% of the times in these types of books, it ends up being an 18-year-old child. So luckily, we're dealing with a grown woman. Love. In chapter 1, Sawyer is on a beach in Australia, and she's smoking a cigarette after hooking up with a guy. She is then going to the store to buy a pregnancy test and more cigarettes. And this is where we get such an emo introduction that I think was inspired by Alaska Young from Looking for Alaska by John Green. Okay? If you are familiar, or if you're unfamiliar, there's a quote in that book where Alaska says, "It's pretty much like you guys smoke cigarettes for fun, I smoke to die." In this book, literally chapter 1, our first sentence from Sawyer is, "Cancer tastes like shit. I suck in deeply menthol gliding past my tongue and filling my lungs with manufactured chemicals. How many of these do I have to smoke before cancer invades my cells, metastasizing until I'm ridden with disease?" Okay, so she literally hates smoking. She's literally only doing it to die quickly. And she says that explicitly multiple times. So after she buys this pregnancy test, she's at the bus stop and reflecting about how she wishes that she could just take her van. She bought a van on sale for like really, really cheap that she's kind of living in and kind of driving around, but she doesn't have a driver's license because she's a fugitive in Australia. Of course she doesn't have a driver's license, but she decides to be responsible and take the bus. So she's hanging out at the bus station and this guy, Simon, this old guy, comes up and sits next to her and she's trying to light a cigarette. She doesn't have a lighter. He offers her one. It's kind of nice. They're talking, they're bonding, he's being polite, and she sees that he has a tattoo on his thigh that is very shittily done, and it says, "Fuck you." And she's like, "Oh my God, I love that." He's like, "I did it myself," and pulls out a stick and poke tattoo kit, pulls out a fresh needle, and she's like, "Sign me up, homie, I want it." Okay, so she gets a tattoo at a bus stop. It says, "Fuck you" on her thigh, and they just keep smoking cigarettes. In response to the tattoo and how much she enjoys it, she says, "Oh my God, I love that. Probably more than my favorite toe." He says, "I'm not sure what you mean by your favorite toe." I hold up my left foot and point at it. "My pinky toe is really cute, don't you think?" Her favorite toe is mentioned 11 times in the book. I don't know. There's no other context to it. She just really, really likes that toe for some reason. So she gets this tattoo. When the next bus comes, she gets on it and he's like, "Yeah, I don't have anywhere to go. I just stopped because you seemed like you needed a friend." Oh, that makes her really sad, but she's grateful for the time that he spent with her, and she gets on the bus. We cut to chapter 2, and Sawyer is at a bar, and she's using an ID for a guy named Jamie Harris. She steals the identity of people and uses their credit cards. She only steals identities from men, but she makes sure that she picks men that have like androgynous names so that she can use them in this way. But she talks about how, she might be like a bad person for doing this, but she's not totally evil because she only uses what she needs to survive. Like she doesn't go overboard. It's not like a spending spree thing. Like she literally just does what she needs to survive. Apparently that includes beers. Don't question it, okay? As she's at this bar, the bartender's giving her a hard time about how much of a train wreck that she looks like and how she's just a piece of shit, pretty much. She's like very aggressive of the bartender. Eventually, a guy approaches her. He's super, super hot, super, super sexy. And she's just like so distraught that this hot, sexy man is talking to her. His name is Enzo. He's Italian. He speaks Italian through the entirety of this freaking book. I have never had to use the translate option in my Kindle so much. But Enzo talks to her and she's realizing that this is not the kind of guy that she can scam. Usually she'll go to bars to pick up a guy, have them take her home, she'll sleep with them, and then in the night she'll steal their stuff. Not really going to be able to do that with this guy. He seems a little bit too hardened, a little bit too suspicious, a little too on edge, you know what I'm saying? So she kind of writes that idea off and is trying to just get away from him before she gets so turned on that she just can't do anything about it. Freaking talk about some insta love, insta attraction bullshit that I hate. He keeps talking to her. He keeps giving her a hard time. They keep drinking. He's buying her drinks and they're yapping. And eventually Enzo reveals that he researches sharks. If you were watching this video, sorry, I have to unpack everything from my bag. I haven't done my makeup in like 3 weeks. It's been the holidays, I haven't done my makeup for work in so long. So I'm like trying to go through my work makeup bag to see what I still use. Anyway, So he reveals that he works at this like shark research institute and that he works with the great whites. And she's like, oh my God, that's so badass. That's so cool. Like, aren't you scared though? Like, aren't you scared that they're going to like eat you alive? And he says, sharks do not like the taste of humans and they usually leave humans alone. Normally I wouldn't say that to you, but it is actually surprisingly incredibly relevant for this stupid story. Sawyer then goes on to tell him about her and about her life and says that her parents died in a car accident and that she has a twin brother named Kevin who she doesn't talk to. Maybe it's the alcohol or maybe it's not. He stares deeply into my eyes when I speak. I've never felt so heard. The best part, he doesn't offer unsolicited advice or lackluster comfort. He just listens. And attentively at that. Like the next thing out of my mouth just might be the cure for cancer. Too bad I am the fucking cancer. Jesus Christ. We're both slightly buzzed now, and while he's not exactly the nicest, he's easy to talk to. I like that he speaks as if he's dying and doesn't have time to be pleasant when he has no fucking interest in doing so. He doesn't waste time on false narratives and assurances. He's the type that will sit next to you because he wants to and stays in the conversation because he cares enough to know what you're going to say next. Sounds like a normal person trying to have a conversation. But I guess that's like super hot. At the end of it, he's like, hey, like, let's get out of here. Let's go to this waterfall that I know that's down the road. She's a little skeeved out by it, but she's like, I don't have anything else to do and you're pretty hot. So they head over to this waterfall. And this is where it starts to get a little sketchy. He was a little brazen, a little rude even, that you could say, in some of these other encounters. But once we get to this waterfall scene, this is where I would say, oh, I'm out. What do you mean? What do you mean? They get there, he jumps into the water first, and again, just instant attraction, instantly like drooling over this man about like, he's so sexy, and you even just look at him and you could get pregnant type of thing. Please put your shirt back on, I beg. He brushes past me without listening to my very reasonable request and dives headfirst into the massive diving hole before us. His skin barely touched mine, yet it feels like electricity is dancing across my body. And she gets in the water with him, they're swimming, they're flirting, you know. I wouldn't call this flirting, but I'll read it to you. Want to know what I thought of you when we were in the bar? That I would get you pregnant with one look, he reiterates dryly. Liquid heat pools in my low stomach from his words. I don't even want kids, so it's shameful to admit that I'm incredibly turned on. It's like your favorite celebrity crush, talking about knocking you up. Doesn't matter if you want kids or not, your panties immediately melt at the thought. Hard pass. I shake my head, breathing in deep, hoping I inhale oxygen that will cleanse the delirium from my mind. That you could ruin me with just one. Oh my God. That you could ruin me with just the tip. I admit, grinning when he looks taken aback. What makes you... What makes you think I'd fuck you? Ouch. I shrug, ignoring the embarrassment beginning to creep up my cheeks. Are you saying that you wouldn't? He's like, I'll ruin you. She's like, I'll ruin you too. And then he's like, oh shit, I don't have a condom. She's like, don't worry, I got an IUD. After the whole pregnancy test scare thing, she spent like the last of her money to get an IUD so that she wouldn't have to worry about that ever again. Hey, smart move, no complaints. He's like, okay, well good, I got tested recently too, and like, I'm clean. They do it. It's a very, very detailed scene about them doing it that ultimately ends with them going back to his house. Like they both were like, oh, it's only gonna be a one night stand. Like, we're gonna destroy each other. This can only be like one time. But then it ends up being so good that they're like, okay, just kidding, you should come over. So she goes to his house, and then we open with chapter 5 of Sawyer waking up in his house and noting like how freaking nice it is and how much of a good time that she had last night. It was the best like spice that she's ever had in her life. But she sneaks around his house. She finds his important documents, his credit cards out of his wallet, equivalent of like a social security card and birth certificate in Australia. Oh, but he's like Italian, so it's like whatever that type of documentation is. And she takes pictures of it on her phone. She knows that he will know that she was in there, but since she didn't take anything physically, she's like, okay, so maybe he won't know exactly what happened or that I did something, and sneaks away and leaves. The one thing that I do want to note during their spice time that they had, when they first are doing it, he makes it very clear, like, I will not do anything if you don't beg me to. Like, I will only do things that you beg for. Hey. Hey, no complaints. That's kind of hot. It's kind of a hot statement to have. So later on that night, when they do it again at his house, she says, oh, are you going to make me beg for it again? And he says, no, beautiful. He's speaking in a lot of Italian. I'm just going to say it in English. I'm not going to try. He says, no, beautiful, I'm going to make you take it from me. If you want a predator to submit to you, then you need to be stronger, which is arguably a horrifying thing to hear, but that's fine. That's fine. Back at the hotel, she is looking in the mirror. You know, she's drunk, she's smoking, she's just kind of vibing in this hotel room. She looks in the mirror, she sees her twin brother, Kevin, looking back at her. Okay. Okay. And then he starts talking to her. And she says, you know, sometimes I wish that when we were in mom's stomach, I would have eaten you. He just keeps snarling at her. And then she goes and gets a gun and like puts it up to her head. My hand trembles violently as I glower at him, a tear slipping free and trailing down my cheek. He always got angry when I cried. Could never understand why he made me so sad. Don't you love me, Pipsqueak? No, I sneer. I hate you. You don't mean that. I hate you. I scream with all my might, feeling my face rush with blood and my chest crack open. I smash the gun's tip into the glass right where his head is. You only hate me because you're just like me. We're the same, Pip. The only one who will love you is me. Right? And then continuation of some more stuff with him. So she's hanging out in the hotel room long enough to get the credit card that she ordered in Enzo's name. Like that was the whole point of getting the hotel room, so that she had like an address to deliver to. So once she gets it, she leaves and she is feeling like crap. Ultimately, right? Like she doesn't want to be stealing identity. She doesn't want to steal his identity, but she's doing what she needs to do to survive. So once she gets his card, she leaves and she's going back to her van, right? Where she lives and sleeps most of the time. And she goes to the bus stop and she runs back into Simon. Simon's the bus stop guy that did the tattoo on her, right? Runs into Simon. She says, I missed you. You've been gone. Why? He chortles, the sound shaking his entire body. Simon doesn't laugh with his mouth. He laughs with his chest. My ex-wife told me the same thing our whole marriage. Probably why she divorced my ass. Can't seem to keep me in one place for very long. I twist my lips. I feel you, Simon. I feel you. But I think that your wife should have gone with you. Meh, fast life ain't for everyone. You're just like me, kiddo, I can tell. Always on the move. Can't hold me down either. He studies me for a second. Then he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a cigarette from a pack. You know we're all so different. I've always been running to something. Always searching for something that I could never find. But I suspect you're the opposite. You're running from something. And she's like, how can you tell? And he's like, you give off the vibe of a wild animal. You very clearly, you have this like scared dog look in your eyes, like someone's chasing after you. She's like, oh, I guess I'm not as mysterious as I thought I was. Yeah, no shit, girly pop. In the next chapter, we're from Enzo's perspective for the first time. And he knows that she stole his credit card. He checked his credit report. He sees that it's open, but he hasn't closed it. And he's been keeping tabs on it, seeing what she's doing with his identity. But he's very, very pissed off about it, right? That doesn't stop him from working. So he's at his little shark sanctuary place and he's swimming in one of the tanks with one of the 15-foot great whites and talking about how much he respects nature and respects the sharks and how beautiful of creatures they are. He's like, I can't let them know I'm angry. You can't let sharks know you're angry. They can sense it. Like, they'll eat me alive. But he is very pissed off about his attraction to Sawyer. Because as angry as he is at her for, like, stealing his identity and all this other stuff, he still just finds her so hot and can't stop thinking about her. She's like, oh my God, homie. We continue to learn a little bit more about him. Really, the big thing that we learn about him is that he started a company for his shark research. And we also meet his partner named Troy, who he went to college with. And they're like good friends. And Troy works with him at the Shark Institute. Okay, there's really not much, dude. I don't really care about the background story about him. Like, there's a lot of shark talk. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, I don't give a shit, to be frank. He tells Troy about Sawyer stealing his stuff. Well, her name's Jamie to him, right? He doesn't know that her name is Sawyer. Anyway, he tells Troy that he got his identity stolen and that he's going to go and find her. And he's like so pissed off and he's going to take like justice into his own hands. So he's walking along the boardwalk and he does spot Sawyer. And so he walks up next to her, catches up to her. And then she's like, uh-oh, he can see the fear in her eyes. But he decides to play it off that he doesn't know that she stole his identity. He's like, okay. And so instead of telling her and confronting her about what happened and being like, WTF, he instead plays dumb and invites her to go to his like research facility and get on a boat with him and go out and swim with sharks. Okay, so And he says, I'll keep you safe, I assure her. And that's the truth. I'll keep her safe from the sharks, just not from me. Oh, Jesus Christ. So in chapter 7, it's Sawyer's perspective, and we open with her saying, this is a mistake, yet here I am, following Enzo as he leads me toward a massive boat on the harbor, a credit card with his name on it burning in my back pocket. And I'm just like, girl, are you fucking kidding me? Like, how dumb are you to get on a boat to go in the middle of the ocean with a man that you don't know? Have you not watched Always Sunny in Philadelphia? I hope you guys have. He's like, it's the implication about taking girls on his boat. And like, they'll do anything with you. They can't say no. It's the implication. What are you doing? But her logic about getting on the boat with him is that most people aren't aware that their identity has been stolen until it's too late. He has no reason to suspect me yet. Nothing was missing from his house, and despite his bottom drawer being unlocked, who would stop to consider identity theft? So he gets on this boat with him. They go out into the middle of the ocean. And this is where I'm going to get very vague in a lot of the storytelling after this, because it gets really crazy really fast. So they go out, right, gets on the boat, drives out to the middle of the ocean, puts down the anchor, has her go out there and like stick her hand in the water. And then he throws chum into the water. The great whites come. There's a couple of sharks just chomping at all the chum at the side of the boat. And it's kind of scary to her. And he comes up behind her, right? He like kind of pushes her to get closer to the edge of the boat so she can like watch these sharks more closely. And then he ends up coming up behind her. Long story short, ends up initiating intercourse with her, and then results in he goes to kiss her. He bites her lip hard enough to make her lip bleed, and then shoves her head into the ocean to bleed in the water where the sharks just were. Okay, okay, cool. so okay, and then he just continues to like do it with her while drowning her where the sharks were, and pulls her head out so she can breathe. And then the second that her head comes up, the sharks come and like jump over, and she like almost got her head bitten off. And then he's like, that's what you get for being a thief. Like, how did you do it? Blah, blah, blah. Back and forth. A little bit more argument until he finishes and then like kind of tosses her to the side of the boat. And then he sees a storm coming. It's like, oh my God. Obviously, it is significantly more detailed. It is this entire chapter of this, ultimately an assault against her, right? This like very, very graphic, horrible assault against her, okay? That was like as light and nice as I could possibly describe what happens. But it ends with him pulling up the anchor and freaking out about the storm coming on the horizon line, and realizing like, he's like, shit, I didn't check the weather, like we're screwed. We're gonna get caught in this like really, really bad storm. Despite our very concerning situation, I want to fucking laugh so badly. I want to laugh. A smile cracks on my face when he throws the heavy metal on the boat and rushes toward the wheel. He catches sight of my face but doesn't let up on his mission. Something funny, Sawyer? He asks. She told him his name during the assault. He asks, ensuring to use my name. I don't know if it's to reassert power or what, but it has the smile slipping from my face like melted wax. You brought me out here to make me think I'm gonna die. And now look, we're both going to die. Like, damn, okay, girl. So in chapter 8, Enzo is trying to get away from the storm, obviously, but it begins to capsize. And Enzo is thinking, seeing Sawyer on the beach earlier fucked with my mind more than I expected it to. I had a mouthful of shit that I planned to say to her, but the only thing at the forefront of my mind was to teach her a lesson. Taking her out on the boat wasn't planned. Fucking her again definitely wasn't planned, and now I regret all of it. I know better than to go out on the water without checking the goddamn weather. It's my own fault. Yet I still want to kill the little blonde thief for it anyway. It was never my intention to kill her, and my stomach is twisted with the knowledge that I might have anyway. That's all in the same sentence. I still want to kill the little blonde thief. It was never my intention to kill her. My stomach is twisted with the knowledge that I might have anyway. Okay. Okay, I guess. Okay. So when the boat capsizes, he tries to reach out for her. He's unable to get her. He passes out. They wake up on the beach. When they wake up on the beach, they're alive. He has his head gashed open. It's a little bloody, but he is ultimately, like internally, he's thankful that Sawyer is actually alive, but he's also irritated by her presence. He looks up though, and there is a lighthouse. And she's like, yeah, the light on the lighthouse was on not that long ago. Like, we should go over there. They make their way over, but it's over very rocky terrain. Her feet are getting super, super cut up on top of the already damaged and just kind of being messed up from being thrown overboard of the ship. Within minutes, I noticed Sawyer's stride grows choppy, the rocks beginning to cut under her feet. She wore flip-flops onto the boat, so those are long gone. Good, he thinks. Oh my God. So they make their way up to the lighthouse, and it looks pretty abandoned. And she's like, okay, so maybe it was like a ghost that turned the light on. Like, that's kind of weird. He's like, it's probably not a ghost. And if it is, like, there's other things we have more to worry about, like starvation. And she's like, which is the worst way of dying? Dying of hunger or dying of scary ghosts? He says, which is quicker? She nods. Okay, you got me there. May the bean gods bless us then. The what? The bean gods, she repeats, reaching the last step and coming up the cement pathway. Canned beans survive the apocalypse. They're always the number one thing left in cabinets after the world's end, so I imagine they'll be in this abandoned lighthouse that potentially hasn't seen life since the dinosaurs. I hate the, like, forced quirky shit. It makes me so mad. They get into the lighthouse, though, and this angry old guy comes down the stairs with a shotgun, and he's like, who are you? What are you doing on my property? Type of thing. It's an old guy. His name is Sylvester. He is a retired lighthouse keeper. And so he takes them in, makes some coffee, and Enzo's first question is about a radio. He's like, okay, like, we need to get in contact with Coast Guard. We need to get in contact with whoever. Like, we need to get home. And Sylvester says that the radio is dead. And there's no ships that come by the island either. Like, it's literally just, I get one shipment once a month, and it just came 3 days ago. So you guys are kind of stuck here for, like, the rest of the month. Enzo is incredibly suspicious of Sylvester, but there's nothing that he can really do about it. So he just asks to get a first aid kit so that he can treat the wound on his head. And ultimately, he ends up helping Sawyer with her feet. I just want to take a couple highlights from this chapter so that you can understand the type of man that we're dealing with. Here, she's not so scared of me. Like, in the lighthouse with another man, she doesn't act the same. Like, she's a little bit more sassy with Enzo. I don't know, maybe because there's another man around that hopefully won't let you assault her again. You know, I don't really blame her for being a little sassy, but okay. Here, she's not so scared of me. She thinks an old man with a wooden leg will save her. Ignoring my glare, she smiles wide at Sylvester, accepting the mug with a warmth in her entirely fabricated expression, just like everything else about her. It's not hard to see that she's as broken as they come. The only warm thing about her is her pussy. She still radiates sunshine, and all it makes me want to do is wipe it clean from her face. She's the light that blinds you right before the lightning strikes. Oh, okay. So there's a lot of back and forth throughout the entire chapter of them, like, asking Sylvester about, like, well, how long have you been here? How do you still have electricity? What the fuck are you even doing? Your story's not adding up. Like, you have electricity but not a radio. Like, what are you talking about? None of it's really adding up, but he is answering all of their questions, and ultimately it's just this little lonely guy, this little lonely old guy on this lighthouse island thing all by himself. And the lighthouse island is called the Raven, and it's about the extent of what we learn about him for this chapter. The next thing that we know, though, he's telling them, like, hey, you guys can stay here for as long as you need. However, I only have one bedroom, which doesn't seem to be a problem because you guys seem to be lovers. And they're like, oh my God, no, we're not. Shut the fuck up. And he's like, oh, my bad. But still, I only have one bed, so you guys are gonna have to, I only have one bedroom, so you guys are gonna have to, like, figure that shit out. They're like, okay, I guess I don't really have a choice. P.S. by the way, you're going to be locked in your bedroom from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. every day because I want privacy and I like watching TV. I like watching my TV alone in the living room. So you have a curfew. Enzo's pissed off about this, understandably so. Sawyer's just like, oh, well, we have to do what we got to do. Like, we don't really have a choice. He's doing us a solid. After this little quarrel over them being lovers or not, he does decide that he's actually going to help Sawyer clean her wounds now. She hisses when I wipe at the wound unkindly, dried blood crusted over it. Only then do I feel a little better. It's not the worst pain that I'll cause her, but it'll suffice for now. Okay, that's cool. In chapter 9, we're back to Sawyer's perspective, and it opens with her saying, I hate him. I loathe him. If I could physically rip out every word that defines him as an asshole from the dictionary and shove it down his throat, I would. But I'm also scared. I'm trapped in a creepy lighthouse with a strange caretaker and a man who looks at me as if he'd prefer to see me between a shark's teeth. There's no escaping this place, no escaping him. I've always been able to run. It's what I've done my entire life, and now that I can't, it feels like my body has been invaded by tiny needle-like parasites. As they fall asleep that night, they end up sleeping in the same bed. Even though they don't want to, neither one of them is going to really give up on Like, both of them are very hard-headed, so they're both just going to end up sleeping in the bedroom together. She wakes up, though, in the middle of the night to a slap to the face because Enzo had a bad dream. Enzo had a nightmare. But that's not the only thing that keeps her up, because she starts to hear the sound of chains, the clanging of metal chains and them dragging slowly down the wooden floor. It reminds me of the sound of a dangerous prison inmate pacing back and forth. Okay, that's a little horrifying to wake up to. So she holds Enzo's hand reluctantly because she wants comfort and hoping that maybe this will comfort his nightmare as well. He doesn't really wake up. It seems to calm him a little bit, so that's good. So 2 birds, 1 stone here. And then she starts to kind of reflect on life. She's like, I'm surrounded by these creepy freaking noises, a creepy lighthouse caretaker, and the man that hates me, and a man that hates me in the bed next to me. Like, what am I gonna do? And then thinks about how my heart cracked when he woke up and looked so disappointed that I was alive. And she starts to cry. Enzo wakes up, finally, and he says, what are you doing? I couldn't sleep. You're crying. I'm not. He's quiet for a beat, the silence arctic. I'm sure you've never had to be strong before, Sawyer, but now is the time to learn. Then he turns over. I close my eyes, gathering the strength I so greatly lack, holding in the tears while the cracks in my chest deepen. Which is so freaking, I feel so bad for her. Again, if there's anything that HD is good at, it's at making you feel horrendous for the female character in the book. Like, good God. In chapter 10, Enzo's perspective, he is continuing to fight these like conflicted feelings of having attraction towards Sawyer and ultimately really hating her for everything that she did. Which he's like, she ruined my life. Like, she destroyed everything I had. Which I'm like, did she? What'd she do? She stole your fucking, all she did was open a credit card in your name. Which I'm not saying is appropriate. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying that I feel like we're being awfully dramatic about that. And if you're gonna blame her for you taking her on a boat and assaulting her, you can right off, you know what I mean? Anyway, they go out to go fishing though to get some food. And she's like, oh, how are you you work with sharks and like you're this like marine biologist guy and you don't know how to fish? And he's like, I don't fish for food and like I don't hurt the sea creatures. Like, I honor them. And she's like, okay, well, I'll take care of it, I guess. This is Enzo's POV. 10 minutes later, she's rejoining me with a long, gnarled wooden cane, a butcher knife, and duct tape. When I just stare, she gives me a wide grin. He let me use his old cane if I promise not to break it. Pretty sure you break everything you touch, I comment. Her smile drops, but she immediately forces it back in place. However, any light that was previously in her eyes has dissipated, and now I feel like the thief. An apology is on the tip of my tongue, but I bite it back. I fell for her tricks and took pity on her before. I refuse to fall for it again. Instead of responding, she quietly gets to work on constructing her spear. I cross my arms, unable to pull my gaze away from her, no matter how hard I try. There's an entire ocean before me that deserves my reverence, yet all I want to do is give it to her. And nothing has made me angrier. Okay, so she builds a spear, ends up actually fishing, ends up getting a fish. Whether it's because she's rising to my challenge or simply trying to ignore me, Sawyer slowly lifts this spear, immovable as she tracks the dark shadow swimming around her legs. Part of me is surprised at her ease in the ocean. There could be anything lurking beneath the surface, but she doesn't shy away as it nears. I hope it's a jellyfish. Oh my, dude, what a freaking douchebag. One moment she's frozen, the next she's plunging the tip of the knife into the water. And then she straightens. I can feel the victory rolling off her in waves. Peeking over her shoulder, she cuts me a look. Staring at me beneath the thick lashes, a smirk tugging up at the corners of her lips. Without looking away, she lifts the weapon, a kingfish, stuck on the tip. I win! Then she turns and goes to walk past me, gearing up to shoulder check me, but I'm stopping her before she even makes it an inch. My hand snaps out to the side, wrapping around her throat and causing her to stiffen once more. Good job, now do it again. Excuse you? Get your own, she chokes out, her tone dripping with malice. Her hand grabs my wrist, nails digging into my skin as she tries to free herself of me, but it only invigorates me more. Before she can blink, I release her and pluck the dead fish off of the makeshift spear. I finally give in and fist her hair with my other hand, bringing her in close. We're a team now, baby. Do what you do best and kill anything unfortunate enough to come near you. Oh my God. By the time I finish my sentence, my hand has moved to her jaw, my thumb swiping across her puffy bottom lip, a cut on it from where I bit her. Instead of her face flushing like I had expected, she pales, her eyes dimming like when the sun dips beneath the horizon. Carefully, she raises her trembling hand and removes my hand from her face. Then she turns and wades further into the water wordlessly, resuming her search for another fish. I could only stand there, both confused and suspicious over what the fuck that was about. Ultimately, I walk away deciding I don't really care. What? What is happening? What do you mean? What do you mean? So she returns later with 3 more fish. Sylvester eventually comes back in from whatever he was doing on the island. And he's very, very impressed. He's like, oh my God, that's good job, dude. And Enzo, it kind of takes away from this highlight and this like compliment of Sawyer to ask Sylvester about the chains that they heard the night before. He's like, I heard it too after, he heard it also after Sawyer went back to sleep. And Sylvester goes on to explain that in 1985, a ship that was carrying 80 prisoners had crashed on the island. A lot of them had died. In 1985, a ship with like 80 prisoners had crashed. A bunch of them died. 4 of them made it to the island. 2 of them tried to break in. He ended up shooting and killing them. The 3rd one ended up getting on like the next boat that dropped off supplies to him and it took them away. I don't know. That's the story. It was a bunch of prisoners though, and he killed them. And then now it's the ghosts of those 2 men that he killed that haunt the lighthouse. And Enzo is like, okay. Suspicious, but all right. And then in chapter 11, Sawyer asks like, oh, do they like touch you and shit? Like they've been haunting you for that long? Like, what do they do? And Sylvester just says, nah, they just get a little restless at night, that's all. There's no reason to worry, though. They're harmless. I don't think that would make me feel any better about being in a haunted lighthouse. I'm not going to front. With chains, nonetheless. Jesus Christ. In chapter 11, Enzo is straight up with Sawyer, and he's like, I do not trust Sylvester. That guy sucks. I'm going to go sneak into his room. I'm going to go dig around and see if I can find anything. And she doesn't want to do it. She's like, hey, that's like really fucked up. He really hasn't done anything. He might be bad vibes and all, but he's helping us out. Like, why are you doing this? But she follows him. They get into his room. They're digging through some drawers and she ends up finding photos. She finds photos of Sylvester, his wife Raven, and then 2 daughters, Trinity and Casey. And then there's this one kind of weird photo of Raven in this swimming pool, like half naked, and she looks very not happy to be in the photo. And Sawyer notices how in the other photos too, her smile looks pretty forced and she looks pretty uncomfortable, but she doesn't say that to Enzo. She just notes that he has a family, and that explains some of the other stuff that they've seen around the lighthouse, like some of the kids' toys and girly stuff that they've seen around. Before they know it, they hear some noises, and it's Sylvester coming back inside, and he's coming upstairs to go to his bedroom to take a nap. So the 2 of them pile into the closet. Sylvester comes in, takes off his peg leg, which is so funny that he has a peg leg. That's whatever. Takes a nap. As he is falling asleep, Sawyer is up against Enzo in the closet, and Enzo starts to touch her inappropriately. He keeps touching her until her body has a physical response to his touch, which she feels very, very ashamed and gross about. If he thinks I'm going to stick around after that, then he really can suck my toe. Jesus Christ. Instead of heading toward our room, I beeline down the hallway. I need to get away from him before I do something stupid and try to earn his forgiveness. He may not have deserved what I did to him, but that doesn't mean he deserves my body. Now, if only I could just stop fucking giving it to him. Which makes me so sad. This like entire book, that is like one of the first instances of it where she is blaming herself for what is happening and acting like she has any say in what's going on. As if she is not on a stranded remote island with a giant man who they have emphasized heavily, greatly, how much bigger he is than her, because of course they have, because it's one of those fucking books. Where I'm like, girl, you were trapped in a closet with a man where you had to be quiet. Obviously, that was not you didn't give him shit. It gives me the ick so bad. And it just made me feel so incredibly sad for this girl. Or for this woman, I guess technically she's my age. But like still, I was like, it just made me so angry. So she's thinking that though, and she kind of runs away with this like shame. And then in chapter 12, it's still in Sawyer's perspective. And she is being tormented by Kevin, her twin brother, and Enzo's voices. Kevin is saying to her, do you think anyone's ever going to love you, Pipsqueak? I'm the only one that does. But not if you're going to be a whore. No one can love a whore. And then Enzo's voice is saying to her, I want to hear what it sounds like when you're breaking and can't scream. You're so easy to break. He has said that to her a couple of times too during their little spicy time about breaking her, which is also horrifying. Like not even just given her, especially given her circumstance in life, but just in general, that's like a really scary thing to have a man say to you or a partner say to you. Like that's a horrifying goal of them to have. She storms away from the lighthouse. There's like no escape on the island. So she's just like running around trying to find somewhere to go, to find some freaking solace to get away from Enzo and to get away from this creepy lighthouse guy. She's thinking to herself, I'm never left alone anyway. I've been running for 6 years and I've never been able to escape Kev. There's no hope of escaping Enzo either. His cruel words, his wicked tongue, and his sinister intentions. And I have a terrible feeling that even when I do slip between his fingers, he'll follow me wherever I go, just like Kev. He'll fucking plague me and won't stop until I'm exactly where he wants me. Hey, so, if it's not obvious already, Kev, her twin brother, abused her growing up, right? Like SA'd her growing up. Then to compare your lifelong abuser to this man, and then this is the man that ultimately she has the happily ever after with. That is crazy to me. That is wild. You would think that like the second that there would, if there was ever a moment that there was a semblance or an action or anything that a partner did to remind you of an abuser, you would think that that would be like dead on arrival. That would be like it. I don't even have words other than that is so crazy to me. But I also get it to a degree of, from like an abuse victim, right? If you don't heal properly or get the correct support when you are trying to heal and get away from an abuser and heal from an abusive situation, oftentimes you end up back in that cycle and you end up with similar people who take advantage of you in similar ways. It's just a fact of life and it's really shitty and it is what it is, right? No blame on the survivors whatsoever. It's a very, very shitty situation to be in, but it is a fact of reality that without the right support and healing and recognizing patterns and behaviors and things, you end up in these same cycles again. So I'm not surprised that she ends up with a guy that reminds her of her abusive brother, but I'm really saddened by it. I'm really saddened that this is considered a romance novel of that situation. But anyway, she finds a cave on the island, luckily. So she is able to get away. She is able to find some type of escape. She gets very, very excited. She runs back to the lighthouse. She borrows a flashlight from Sylvester and goes back to the cave and goes exploring. There's like a pool in the center of it. There's glowworms. It's so cool. It's beautiful. And she's just so excited to have this little piece of privacy, this little piece of escape. That night, the ghosts, the prisoners, they're making all sorts of noise. And Enzo is also restless. So they bicker a little bit before bed, and it ends up with her shoving him once he tosses and turns one too many times and irritates her. And that results in him turning around and pushing her off of the bed. The wind knocked out of her, and then he feels immediately guilty. So he comes over, picks her up, puts her on the bed, is trying to be nice, I guess. But she says, "Oh, fuck you," I spit, bucking out of his hold until he's forced to set me down. And then I'm full out tackling him. Self-preservation, I'm too furious. Furious at him for throwing me off the bed, then acting guilty like he didn't fucking mean to. For going into Sylvester's room and getting us trapped in that closet. For touching me and making me feel things I shouldn't feel that I can't feel. For messing with my fucking head. I slap him wildly. They have this argument back and forth. He says that a shrimp is more intimidating than her. She says, "That's so fucking rude." He says, "You want to hear rude, Sawyer? How about the fact that it's hard to sleep next to a fucking soul-sucking demon, and you being so close makes me sick to my stomach?" She is crushed by this statement, by the way. I think anybody would be. But he continues to lay it on thick. He says, "What's worse, I can still smell you on my fingers despite washing you clean of me. Now tell me how the hell you expect me to find peace when you're invading every one of my goddamn senses." "You're so fucking hot and cold," I bite. "Good," he barks, "because there's not a damn second that goes by where you're not fucking with my head. You're the worst thing to ever happen to me. Every day I regret walking into that bar. I hate myself for falling for your lies and believing that you were nothing more than a sad girl. I hate that I allowed myself to be seduced by you, and I hate that I can't stop, even now." I fight against his hold, his harsh words needling beneath my skin and hooking into the sinew. They hurt, but only because I can't blame him. "Get off me," I hiss. "Better stop touching me, Enzo, or else you might accidentally be seduced. Everything you do is calculated. Were you even truly panicked when we were in that closet, or was that just another one of your schemes?" "I didn't ask you to touch me, dickhead. How could I have possibly known what you were going to do? You were doing it to gain sympathy," he accuses. I am baffled. I am fucking speechless. So... What? What? I'm also baffled and speechless. He goes on to keep like gyrating against her, and she's like, I don't want to have sex with you. And he continues to say that she was doing this to build sympathy, and they argue until he sees something out of the window that makes him stop cold. When they look out the window, they see a young girl in a tattered white dress walking into the ocean. Huh? Okay. So Sawyer starts beating on the window and like yelling at the girl. And then Sylvester comes storming into the room and he's like, what the fuck is happening? And they're like, the girl. And she's not there anymore. And Enzo's like, oh, I guess it must have been another ghost. Okay, I guess. We're all very nonchalant about these ghosts. In chapter 13, from Enzo's perspective, it's been a week since we got stuck in the closet, and every day since then she disappears somewhere for most of the day, leaving after breakfast and not returning until late in the evening. She acts normal enough, joking with Sylvester, but then ignoring my existence at night, keeping her back turned to me even when we sleep. She doesn't talk about where she goes, but as each day passes, my curiosity burns hotter. Maybe it's because I don't like being alone with Sylvester all damn day, though I've found plenty to fix around this place to keep me occupied. Or maybe it's because I don't like that she's found an escape. Okay. He BS's a little bit with Sylvester. Sylvester makes some comment about how, like, women these days, they're so sassy, and one of those, like, you don't beat him like you used to make him behave. It's, like, essentially what happens. That's essentially what he says. I don't know what's happening. And so then he's like, okay, I'm not doing that. Like, we're not having that conversation. So he leaves to go and try and find Sawyer. He does like a lap around the island, can't find anything. Eventually he spots the cave though. He goes in there and suddenly it dawns on me why she's been getting paler and how she seemed to have disappeared without a trace. It's the goddamn cave. Something about her keeping that from me pisses me off. Then again, everything about her accomplishes that without even trying. Lord knows how big it is, and she could have easily have gotten hurt and would have no way of letting me know. As the scenarios play out, all the ways that she could have gotten herself in some type of trouble, my fury only heightens while I make my way into the cave. I can't see shit, but I'm conscious of each step as I descend. I reach flat ground and charge through a tunnel, bright blue glow emanating from beyond. They have some back and forth. She makes a joke about him being obsessed with her, and if he's like a murderous psycho, he's like, I might be. Baby, if anyone were to become obsessed with you, it would only be for what's between your thighs, not because you have anything else to offer. Jesus Christ. Why are you here, Enzo? This is my safe space, and you're making it a not safe space. Instead of answering, I finally take in her safe space. It would be pitch black if it weren't for the luminous ceiling and glowing pool in the middle from like these glowworm things. He asks if she knows what's dangling above her head. She doesn't. He makes fun of her for not knowing these things. And then I approach her, enjoying the way that her body senses mine, the cords of muscles swelling with tension along her dainty shoulders and the way her bones seem to stiffen. I like that she feels me, fears me. Oh, okay. So then she says, are you going to hurt me? Yes, I say, my growing harder from just the thought of it. What are you going to do? And he says, now why would I tell you that? And they have this whole teasing thing about hurting each other. There's a consensual aspect of a whole pain thing, right? Seeking pain, wanting to feel physical pain dealt upon you to like take away from the mental pain that you have. Okay, right? There's a little bit of like kinky stuff happening here. But this is like scary. I don't know how you could have like a healthy kinky conversation in that way with a man who genuinely wants to actually unalive you. Genuinely actually wants to hurt you, and not in a fun, hot way, just in like a very genuine, painful way. I feel like we're really mixing up some like kinks and genuine bad stuff. I don't know if it's just like a misunderstanding of that, or just like we're going for like extremes, just for like shock value, people reading this. But people were genuinely on Goodreads like praising this book and talking about how much of like a cinnamon roll boyfriend he was. So I don't have words, I guess is what I'm saying. He then forces her to touch herself in front of him to like prove that she is turned on by what is happening, by him threatening her. I don't know if she's turned on, but her hand comes up and there's like evidence of her being turned on, right? Evidence of like a physical response to what is happening. Then I step away, saying nothing else as I make my way out of the cave and toward the lighthouse. She'll stay behind, embarrassed and ashamed, and won't dare show her face for a while. Plenty of time to make myself come to the image of that tear falling past her eyes. Okay, I want to cry. This is so horrific. So I'm going to take a second to read you on Goodreads the review that H.D. Carlton wrote for their own book. This is published on August 29th, 2022. I didn't expect much from this book. It's the first published book coming off the duet, and most people are chomping at the bits for that world. I knew this book would be compared, wouldn't live up to Zayd and Addie. Truthfully, my expectations were extremely low. But I needed something, I don't know, lighter? Lighter? I needed to start fresh, something new and different for not only myself, but maybe the readers too. There will be people who will see Enzo and Sawyer as lesser than, but in some ways I find their story so much more bizarre and interesting, and I love them for that. To me, they're explosive. They're not grumpy X sunshine, they're thunderstorm X lightning. Enzo is angry and loud, and Sawyer is bright yet destructive. Maybe it's because I love storms, but they're perfect together. I hope you all go into it with zero expectations and no comparisons in mind, and I hope you all enjoy their story as much as you're able. Anyway, thank you for being here. That's all I could really ask for. These comments are saying, I absolutely loved this book. The characters are amazing. I related to Sawyer so much. Absolutely love this book. I finished this today and I thought it was amazing. I loved Enzo. This book was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Hello? Am I one of my top reads so far this year? It's amazing. OMG, Enzo owns me. Are you guys fucking high? You killed this book, lighter in comparison to the cat and mouse duet in all the right ways. I'm so happy to have read this book, I couldn't put it down. Sawyer and Enzo are everything. I don't have any words. Actually, I think that made it worse. I wanted to read those to maybe feel better and get away from the situation for a second, but I think that actually just made everything exponentially worse. Oh, no. In chapter 14, Sawyer is saying how much that she hates him, and she heads back to the lighthouse. She ends up sitting on the couch and talking to Sylvester for a little bit because Enzo's doing off God knows what. And Sylvester keeps touching her, like he puts his hand on her shoulder, and she feels very uncomfortable by it. She feels very uncomfortable that he keeps being creepy and making her uncomfortable, but there's really nothing else that she can do about it. And then Enzo comes in, and he's like, what the fuck are you doing? Pretty much confronting him about touching Sawyer, which, hey, love, respect. However, a little hypocritical. Sylvester calls him out so much. He says, you got a problem with it? I don't see your name written anywhere on her. Sylvester retorts, I won't just write it, I'll carve it. Take your hands off her or I'll do it for you. Abruptly, I stand, dislodging Sylvester's grip and attracting both of their attention. Let's not fight, okay? And while I appreciate both of your concerns, please don't use me as a tool in your pissing contest. She goes to the bedroom and she found this old book about the lighthouse, and so she's reading that and trying to pass time in bed when Sylvester comes in to apologize to her. He's like, hey, sorry if I made you uncomfortable. She's like, why do you keep touching me then? Like, obviously you're not very sorry. I imagine any man would have a hard time keeping their hands off you. To keep their hands to themselves when you look like you do, when you're dressed how you are. Can't exactly blame them, can ya? It sounds like you're talking about little boys. A man wouldn't touch a woman without consent. Plus, a bathing suit isn't an invitation to be violated. He chuckles deep in his throat, the rough sound lacking humor. It's been a rough day. Bedtime's at 7 p.m. tonight, okay? What? Why? He grumbles something, waddling his way to the door. We'll all start fresh tomorrow morning, he says. Just as he steps out, Enzo appears, his face immediately cast in suspicion. He's shirtless, and it's almost enough to distract me from the caretaker's odd behavior. Enzo enters the room, the pair watching each other closely. You two have a good night, the old man calls before firmly closing the door behind him. I stand, having no idea what the hell to say, but prepared to say something until I hear an audible click, and he locks them in there. So then Enzo's like, what the fuck was that about? What just happened? She's like, I don't know. He came in to apologize, and then ended up saying that if a man touches me, I ask for it because I'm wearing bikini and shorts. Did he touch you again? Shut the fuck up, Enzo. Oh my god. That's Kaylee speaking, not Sawyer. But like, oh my god. She calls him on it. She's like, hey, you don't have much room to talk anyway. Come again? Well, did you not fuck me while actively drowning me? Did you not fuck me while actively drowning me? You're gonna act like there isn't something wrong with that? A dimple begins to appear in his cheek, and I swear to God, if the fucker actually smiles right now, I'm going to kill him. You're right, he concedes, pausing a beat before saying, and I do it again. I'm the only one allowed to touch you, beautiful thief. And I'm the only one who will cause you pain. Understand? What are you, a barbarian? Did caveman raise you? I wouldn't call nuns cavemen. You were raised by nuns? And then he changes the topic and asks about the lighthouse book that she's holding. They have this argument back and forth about why she has the lighthouse book. And ultimately, it's because she's trying to find the beacon, because there should be a radio in the beacon room, and she's just wanting to leave. And she ends up telling him, I don't care what happens to you. She's like, I just want to leave. I just want to get out of here. I don't care what happens to you. And he says, you've made that clear, baby. And it's so fucking unfortunate for you that I care what happens to you. I push against his chest, but he doesn't budge, and I'm breathless as I bite out, why the fuck would you care? He leans in impossibly closer, a cyclone of electricity forming in the room. Every time his skin slides against mine, a storm cloud swells and lightning strikes somewhere around the world. How many others have shipwrecked because he can't stop touching me? Oh my God. Because I want to see you suffer, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that that happens. If that means keeping you alive just so I can tear you down, then so be it. And people think he's hot. And people like him. I don't get it. In chapter 15, Sawyer is walking around the room, tapping on the walls, trying to find like a hollow portion that maybe would be the stairway up to the top area. And maybe there's like the radio up there, right? So she's trying to find the way to get up there. Also, she notes that in the book, it documented all of the visitors that the lighthouse has ever had, and it never said anything about the prisoners, which is super freaking sketchy. Ends up again, another one of those scenes where Enzo kind of corners her and like ends up like pushing her up against the wall. And then he's like, I know you're turned on. I know you want it. Beg for it. Please, I whisper, uncaring of how pathetic I've become, reduced to thoughtlessness and single-mindedness with the simple thrust of his hips. So this is where the author wants us to believe that she is a willing participant. That even though she's mad and she knows that he hates her, that she's just so turned on at how sexy this man is. Please, I whisper, uncaring of how pathetic I've become, reduced to thoughtlessness, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't fuck you even if you begged me to. Tell me why you think that is. I shake my head, feeling the heavy weight of denial soaking in through my bones. Not just denial, but shame too. I didn't mean to beg him. Didn't want to. The word just slipped out as readily as my self-preservation did. It's because it's not good enough, Sawyer. You're not good enough. There are tears welling in my eyes before I can stop them. You know why else? Because I fucking hate you. He spits, shaking me to punctuate his words. I claw at his hand, breaking the skin and leaving bloody trails in its wake, but the sting doesn't faze him. Hey, I'm not for violence, but I think I'd unalive a man. What do you mean? I'd feed him to the sharks for saying such a thing. That's crazy. As they're going through this like whole back and forth, somebody starts banging on the ceiling above their heads. Like this absolute booming thud. There's one last pause, and then two limbs are pounding against the ceiling in quick succession, growing louder and more frantic. The panic becomes too sharp, and I'm screaming and bolting toward the spiral stairs, sightless in my desperation to get away. I lose my footing and pitch forward. Another scream is torn from my throat as I go down face first. Suddenly, Enzo's hand is gripping my arm, a moment later hauling me up before my nose can connect with the metal stairs. Right, so they were on the second floor, had the freak out, rushes down to the first floor, almost trips and falls. He catches her. Sylvester's there. He's like, what the fuck is your guys' problem? What are you guys screaming about? He's like, don't worry about it. She's just being Sawyer. And she starts to have a panic attack. She thinks that she's having a heart attack, asks them to call the water police. They're like, what the fuck is the water police? And Enzo just tells Sylvester to ignore her. I love that. I love that so much. In chapter 16, I hate everything. Sawyer has a naughty dream about Enzo. Ends up, he accidentally wakes her up with another one of his nightmares. She wakes him up. He's like, what did you dream about? They recreate the dream that she had. I really fucking hate it. I'm not going to talk about it. But at the end of the scene, she's like, I thought I was a nightmare. I thought you weren't going to like do anything with me. And he says, what's one more nightmare to live with? Oh my God. So then they do it. And then at the end of it, like after they're finished with everything, she says, was that the nightmare you were hoping for? I mutter, feeling the tension thickening between us. He glances at me. No, it was worse. On our first night together, we either talked or basked quietly in the aftermath of a good fuck. Now all I feel is cold while I listen to the low creak outside of our door, followed by the sound of chains dragging along the floor. Oh my God. In chapter 17, Enzo and Sylvester discuss sharks and like Enzo's work and everything. And Sylvester tells him that there is a storm coming and they need to stay inside. And when he says that, he like pats Enzo on the back and leaves. And Enzo's like, hey, fucker, how about you don't ever touch me or Sawyer ever again? Okay. Sylvester just keeps walking and doesn't acknowledge it. And Sawyer is like, overhears this and she's like, hey, you probably shouldn't have said that. Like, you're just causing drama for no reason. Are you expecting me to let him belittle and lay hands on me to avoid discomfort? Good point. Sorry. I shake my head and I face the water again. How is it that my hatred for how she makes me feel is somehow shifting, and now I'm hating the way I make her feel? I don't want your apologies. It's men that made you feel and think that way. They should be apologizing to you. Are you going to apologize? You're one of those men. If I ever feel sorry about it. She's right. I should be apologizing, but I also don't lie, and while there is guilt needling its way into my system, I'm not ready to give into it yet either. It was wrong. Fucked up. I agree. It was. But you're not upset because I fucked you. You're upset because I scared you. You're right. I've been scared my entire life, and I've been touched my entire life. It'll never hurt when you touch me, but it hurt that you were no longer safe. Fury explodes in my chest, and I'm whipping toward her, putting my face in hers. So I made you feel what you made me feel. I won't deny that I'm the villain in your story, baby, but please don't insult me by acting like you didn't hurt me first. Hey, hey guys. So just again, I would just like to touch base. We were talking about, she just took his identity, right? She didn't even take his identity. She opened up a credit card in his name. And yeah, I know that like feels really bad. Like that's like a really shitty thing to say, right? Like I'm not gonna defend her in any way, but I feel like in the grand scheme of crimes, in the grand scheme of scaring somebody, opening a credit card in someone's name versus putting their bloody face into shark-infested waters and waiting until the bubbles stop is a little bit different than the other one. I feel like we're apples to oranges, baby. Don't hide your tears, beautiful. You're so pretty when you cry. I said I wouldn't apologize until I meant it. I suggest that you do the same. Oh my God. So then she goes on to say, I am sorry, and maybe you are too. Isn't that why you told Sylvester not to touch me again? Because you don't want any more men hurting me? If he does, I'll just do what I said I had to do, which is carve his name into her, by the way. The thought of carving my name into her soft skin has my thickening. She makes it so hard to feel sorry when hurting her is so fucking intoxicating. That defeats the purpose of not hurting me. I never said I didn't want to hurt you. You're not carving your name into my skin, you freak. Watch me, pretty thief. You like to fuck me when you hurt me, Enzo, and you said that you wouldn't unless I begged, which I never do. You're as unreliable as I am when it comes to fucking each other, and last night was a clear indication of that. This may come as a surprise to you, baby, but I don't believe a goddamn word that you say anyway. Then it turns into this whole thing, and he's like, you are a liar. And she's like, I lied about my name. I was a freaking fugitive. Of course I lied about my name. And it's this whole back and forth that is like very victim blamey, and I do not like it at all. But it ends with the storm does come. The three of them get drunk together. They ask a bunch of questions about each other. We learn about Sylvester, and we learn that he lost his leg from some bite, and then it was like necrosis or whatever, and he had to chop it off at the knee. And then that his wife and him were married for 30 years. They started to get depressed. Like all of the girls started to get depressed and wanted to leave. He didn't want to leave because that was like his whole life. And then the older daughter, Trinity, ended up unaliving herself. The mom, Raven, and then the daughter, Casey, left 2 days later. They just hopped on a boat and left. And he didn't want to come after them because they would have been sad. And this is all that he knew anyway. Oh, okay. Okay. We learn that Enzo's dad died before he was born in some fishing accident, and then that his mother dropped him off in Rome with a bunch of nuns, and that's why he was raised by nuns, because his mom like abandoned him as a child. And then we get more information from Sawyer, and her brother Kevin was a cop, and he had been abusing her throughout her entire life. And then there's some insinuation that then he was having other cops also abuse her, and that he had isolated her from all sorts of friends and had convinced her parents that she was this like piece of crap and he was the perfect child. And so when her parents died, she was actually pretty relieved about it because they would stop comparing them. It was just really like a very, very horrific, a lot more detailed than that. But ultimately it ends with Sylvester offering for her to stay at the lighthouse. Like she needed a fresh start and she needed to get away from the world. So he's like, you could just stay here. And she's like, I'll think about it. And the chapter ends with Sawyer going up to her room, kind of realizing like how overly drunk she is. And Enzo catches Sylvester staring at her, and there's a slimy feeling crawling down my spine, definitely from Sawyer's story, but also from the way that Sylvester stares at her, as if he's already decided that she's staying, and now he only needs to make sure that it happens. Okay. In chapter 18, Sawyer is, again, super drunk, but she wakes up in the spare bedroom with Enzo, and she can see the storm, these giant waves coming at the lighthouse, and it's kind of freaking her out. She ends up asking Enzo probably the saddest question that could possibly be asked in this scenario after opening up about her abuse as a child. Does touching me make you feel even more disturbed than usual, now that you know my brother liked to touch me too? Jesus Christ! Sawyer! He snaps, spinning me around to face him, but my vision also spins, and all he accomplishes is sending me teetering on two left feet. I think I feel sick too. My entire body is full of alcohol and everything inside me is sloshing around in it like they don't have assigned seatings. I giggle, imagining myself telling all my organs to go back to their seats or else extra homework for them. Then I frown, my brows knitting. Maybe they need extra homework. It's going to be a lot of work to get them functioning correctly again. Look at me. I can't. Don't ever think of yourself that way. And don't ever think that I will too. You're so much more than the people who have hurt you. I will make you see that, he vows. What happened to you does not define you. It only forged a new path that will take you to a different version of yourself. But no one can force you to walk that road. Only you can determine who you will be once you get there. It's your choice who you become, Sawyer. She starts to cry, and she's internally thinking, for so long I had convinced myself that it was clinging to me, despite my desperate attempts to escape it, but now I realize it's me that's been holding on like a child with their favorite teddy bear to the familiar sadness, to the depression associated with this trauma. He says, no more running, baby. I want him to come looking for you just so I can have the privilege of ending his life for touching what's mine. I wasn't yours then. You didn't even know me. You were always destined to be mine. His words make no sense. So hot and so cold, and as much as I want what he's saying to be true, it could never happen. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive, he'll always haunt me. Then I'll haunt you worse. What do you mean? What do you mean? Please stop. Hey, again. There are things that he is saying that is like so fucking good, right? It is all so validating. Her perspective of like a survivor of abuse, so valid, and the commentary is like very good. His commentary back to her, very validating, very reassuring, positive, like how wonderful that would be to hear in that situation, right? God bless. But then to say that, I'm gonna haunt you worse? I don't find that reassuring personally. I think that is horrific. I like the part where you're gonna like unalive him for me. I love that. Hey, y'all know me. I love revenge, but don't haunt me. Leave my ass out of this. You're supposed to help me. Anyway, oh Jesus. She wakes up to the sound of crying, and Enzo's awake, also hearing the crying, and she tries to talk to him. He tells her to go back to bed. Enzo, I ask. He's quiet for a long time. I've convinced myself that he's fallen asleep, but then he sighs. What, Sawyer? Did you ever see your mom again? No. Did you ever look for her? Why are you asking? I guess I want to know if it's possible to let someone go that doesn't want to be found. I'm capable of deducing, and I get that you do what you do so he can't find you, he says slowly, as if offering his understanding and empathy to someone is new, uncharted territory. Have you tried? Yes, I cut him off. I've gone to my parents. I've gone to the authorities when we were 16. Kev was always really good at manipulating people, so charming and charismatic, blah, blah, blah. I'm not reading the rest of this. He goes on to say how much that he wants to hurt Kevin, which I love that. She's like, why would you do that for me? He says, because I want to be the only thing that keeps you up at night. And if anyone is going to hurt you, it's going to be me. More than anything, I want him to, and that scares me. Enzo can't save me from my fate, and I will never ask him to. Whatever this is, it will never work. We've caused each other too much pain, and even still, I know he's struggling to forgive me, another thing that I could never ask of him. Again, what did you do? You didn't do anything. You got a credit card. You're not the one that caused him to crash the boat. You're not the one that caused the boat to capsize, or for him to take you in the water. I will survive you, Enzo, just as I have survived him, and I will do no different than I've done before. I will do what I must. I never found my mother, he tells me quietly. I did search for her, but I didn't search for long. You know why? Why? because she let her sadness transform her into a miserable human being capable of hurting others just to save herself. She wasn't worthy of my forgiveness. Just like you. He doesn't say it, but the words slither over my skin and needle beneath like tiny little parasites. I bite my tongue while he pulls away. I asked for that, but it doesn't make it any easier to swallow. Bring him to me, Sawyer. I'll take care of him. I won't let you get away as she did. I shake my head, frustrated that this man can't let me go. She was lucky then, I whisper, hoping my words were as sharp as his. He doesn't bother to give me a response, but he does turn away, and I know they were. I can feel it. Did that hurt, baby? She's thinking. Ew, what the fuck? What does that even mean? Hello? I didn't even skip any sentences. Like, I read that to you in its entirety. I'll take care of him. I won't let you get away as she did. So is that a threat? Because that also sounds kind of nice. It also sounds in the sense of like, hey, let me take away your sadness and hurt him before you turn into like the monster that my mom did. But also, I guess that could be a threat of like, you're already the monster that my mom was, and like, I'm not going to let you go and continue to be a monster. I guess you could interpret that either way. And again, neither of those are great things. In chapter 19, it's been a week since she got like way too drunk and overshared and had that whole talk with Enzo, but she is hungover this day and she goes wandering and she goes out to the cave, and they've been on the island for a total of 19 days. So hopefully only like a week left, but she goes wandering into the cave and she goes deeper than she ever has before, and she ends up falling down because she is hungover and she kind of gets dizzy. And when she falls down, she like hits her head on a rock and she passes out. So then we cut to chapter 20 and Enzo is at the house talking to Sylvester. Eventually he leaves. He goes to the cave because he knows that that's where Sawyer is. He finds her passed out at the bottom. He's like super pissed off about her hurting herself and about being injured, but it's kind of disguised in the whole like, I care so much and she's so frustrating that she would hurt herself way. He reminds her that she needs to continue living so that he can keep hurting her. He places her onto their bedroom, like onto their bed in their bedroom, and he's like trying to do first aid and taking care of her. She says, thanks, call us even, I guess. Call us even for what? I saved your life, you saved mine. Is this another one of your lies? No. Do you think you washed up on the shore by luck? And she goes on to tell him that he passed out. Like when the boat capsized, he passed out, she was awake, she swam to him and like swam to shore with him on her back, and she saved his life. He, although he won't admit that he believes this and he won't admit how touching this is, he is very, very nice to her and goes on to like take very good care of her. He forces her to get in the shower. She like had got a cut on the back of her head, and so he helps her shower, kind of wash around it, asks her more questions about her saving his life. She goes on to explain swimming and taking him to shore, internally thinking it was 58 minutes and 10 seconds. That's how long that she swam because she had nothing else to do. I needed something to focus on other than the burning pain in my muscles and the pure horror that anything could come up and eat me alive at any minute. So I counted every fucking second, muttering the numbers as if at any moment I would wake up from the nightmare that I was lost in. He says, I called you weak. Why didn't you correct me? Because I am. You're not. You're not weak, Sawyer. You're exceptional, and I'm sorry I validated that misconception. You did something admirable. Imagine what you could do if only you believed in yourself. Oh my God, it's so gross. At the end of the shower, after all this conversation, he tries to like make a move on her, and she's like, hey, I don't want to do anything. Like, my head hurts. Is that a lie, Sawyer? Shit. I don't know why I thought that I could get away with that. Maybe because most people would take my word for it, considering I just suffered a head injury. Finish up, he snaps, pushing off the wall and storming out of the room. I close my eyes in defeat, angry with myself for defaulting to the one thing he despises most. It's a habit. One I haven't figured out how to break yet. What? Okay, you know what? I'm not going to get into it. In the next part of the chapter, hey, I ain't gonna lie. Real recognize real. It's kind of hot, okay? This book sucks. It's all abusive. It's all really terrible. But if we take this one little piece of the chapter out of what this is, I get it. So she goes back into the room, and it turns into this, he's like, I want to be able to read you. Like, I want to be able to know when you're lying to me. And so he's like, tell me a lie. So she does. And then he's like, tell me a truth. And then she does. And then it turns into like, whatever, this like whole foreplay thing of like, tell me a truth, tell me a lie. And they're like hitting on each other. And then they end up like masturbating together, right? They're like showing each other what they like and blah, blah, blah. And I'll read you some of these like excerpts toward the end here because I'm like, God damn in a good way and god damn in a bad way. Enzo and we're not very compatible, I think. We speak different languages most days, and it's a constant battle of figuring each other out. But when we're stripped of our clothes and our bodies are doing the talking, we understand each other as if God was never angry with humans and separated us by the way we move our tongues. When we're like this, the way we move them is the only thing that makes sense. I'm sorry. As if God was never angry with humans and separated us by the way we move our tongues? That is a crazy sentence in like a good way. I was like, oh my God, that like, wow, okay. And they keep going back and forth throughout the whole thing, telling each other truths and lies. And he's like, tell me a lie. And she says, I hate you. And he says, I hate you too, baby. What, was that a truth or a lie? I asked quietly, my voice still hoarse. I never asked him for one. He glances at me, tossing his t-shirt to the side and standing. Still, he stays quiet as he pulls his shorts back on, prompting me now to suddenly feel exposed. I wrap the towel back around me while he straightens. Enzo? I push. When his eyes meet mine, my chest caves. There's no emotion on his face, as if what we just did meant nothing. It didn't mean anything. With one last lingering look, he turns away, walking out of the room without a word and shutting the door softly behind him. My lip trembles, but I clamp it between my teeth, refusing to cry over him. We built our tower to heaven, but God is angry again, and once more we're speaking different languages. I didn't like it so much the second time. I wish we would have just said it the one time. Don't overplay it too much, but it's okay. That's so shitty, though. They were making progress and talking and being romantic, and he was being sweet, and then just, like, shut down and left. I hate when people don't talk about their feelings. In chapter 22, we're with Sawyer, and she's outside. It's after sunset. She's just, like, staring at the stars. And Enzo comes up to her, and she says, do you believe in aliens? If you've seen some of the creatures that live in the ocean, it's not much of a stretch to believe that they exist elsewhere, too. Do you think I'd be happier if I lived in another world? His response isn't immediate, but it stops my heart anyway. Maybe, but I wouldn't be. Aww. I've never feared death, Enzo. I'm only afraid to live and for it to all be for nothing. I've spent so much time running that I don't even remember why I'm living. Do you remember why you're living? It takes him several moments to answer, but even as a kid, I was angry at the world, and I was always told that I'd waste my life away if I settled into anger. Of course I didn't care, and until recently I stayed firm in that way of thinking. I didn't care about life when I felt so goddamn worthless to the one who was supposed to love me the most. Then you came around and stole it from me, yet somehow it feels like you gave it back instead. And then it's like this back and forth, and he starts to like flirt with her and like kind of kiss on her and stuff, and he says, do you know what attracts a predator to its prey, Maya love? What? When it's hurt. I love it when you're hurt, baby, but only when it's me who inflicts the pain. You will heal, Sawyer, as long as you are with me, but you will never have to cause pain again. But when you are between my teeth, I will make you bleed. I will hurt you instead. That's where you were, oh my God, that's where you will find the meaning of life, and that's where you will live and find a life with me worth living. Why? You couldn't even say that you didn't hate me. I don't hate you, Sawyer, he says roughly. It was the truth when you asked if I hated you, but I couldn't lie, so I said nothing. And every time I laid eyes on you today, all I could think of was that I never really did. Choose to live. Choose me. Oh my God. Ew. And so then they end up like doing it. I'm not getting into it. There's like a whole spice thing. Oh, actually, I will get into it. There's this one thing. I hate it. Okay, hey, no judgment. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of judgment happening here. Hey, what just happened? Some of that exchange, it's a little hot. I'm not gonna lie. I get it. There's things you don't really say on the internet. However, I will say some of the discussion about this whole like pain, comfort thing is understandable, and it's presented in a way that is like almost not terrible, and then it immediately goes terrible again. You know what I mean? There's like these little sprinklings of like decent sentences kind of psychoanalyzing the like kink that they have, or in like why they would feel comfort in it, and then it just derails entirely, and it's like so frustrating. Like it's so unhealthy and bad the way that it is portrayed overall. But there's this one thing that happens 4 times in the book where he hooks his pointer and middle fingers into each side of my cheek and pulls back hard enough to like rip her lips, where he like does that because he's like, oh, you don't want to smile for me? And then he like does that to make her smile. It stretches them until what feels like every single tooth of my mouth is on display. And she's like talking about how hot that is and how she can't talk and how like her mouth goes so dry because of it. But that just sounds really, really painful and not fun. And he does it 4 separate times. And then he says, keep testing me. Your smile is only pretty because of those teeth, and I would hate to see them missing. So then she like Uno reverses, finishes him off, and then gets up and just leaves. Pretty like a big fuck you to him, basically. She gets up and she says, I'm going to choose to live because I refuse to die for Kevin. But the life I've chosen for myself is something I have to suffer through alone, Enzo. He just glares, jaw clenched so tightly that the muscle is bursting from his cheek. Before I lose my nerve, I rush toward the lighthouse, dreading the moment I'm locked in her room with him. I asked him to hurt me, but it seems I've done a far better job of it. In chapter 23, from Enzo's perspective, he is sad about what happened with Sawyer, and he's irritated talking to Sylvester. Sylvester gives him some like whiskey, and he makes some kind of offhand comments about how he's going to take care of Sawyer and how like she won't be his problem for much longer. Really just kind of baking in this fact that Sylvester has it in his mind that Sawyer is going to stay on the island with him and Enzo is going to leave. And it's really pissing him off. And so he leaves and he goes up to the bedroom, and Sawyer's in bed. And she talks to him about how she's kind of considering staying on the island, like genuinely, because she doesn't want to get arrested. Enzo's response is like, hey, you can stay with me, you can work for me, like we'll figure something out, like we'll make sure that that doesn't happen. And I don't hate you. And says, despite what I did to you on the boat, I have no interest in turning you into shark food. That was really shitty. It was. Most would say shittier than you deserved. Would you say that? Yeah, you didn't deserve that. Then say you're sorry. I'm sorry, I murmur, letting her see how genuine I am, because I am sorry. I assaulted her, and we both know that. I imagine if my mother stuck around, she would have left me then if she knew the way that I treated women. Sawyer says, I don't forgive you. Not until you properly apologize for it. You've been an unbearably raging asshole to me this entire time. Yes, I fucked up, but you're like really fucking mean, and you've hurt my feelings more than I care to admit. You're right. And she says, if you... Okay, I also, not gonna lie, this next part, a little hot. She says, if you want me to stay with you, choose you, then I want you to get on your knees and apologize for how you've been treating me. He does. He's like proud of her for making him beg for her forgiveness. Sawyer deserves better than what I've done to her. We're both broken in our own ways, and instead of seeing that and understanding her, I let my own hurt control me. All it's done is cause her pain. You know, he goes on this like whole thing about how he goes on acknowledging how fucked up everything that he did was and how she didn't deserve it. And ultimately, she was just a lost woman doing what she could to survive, and he's an overreacting asshole. While I'm not entirely ready to tell her all of that, it doesn't change how I feel about her, and it doesn't change that she doesn't deserve my wrath nor my cruelty. He even acknowledges that he's taking a lot of his anger out from his mother on her. I'm like, oh my god, okay, we're getting like some self-reflection. We're getting like a little bit of like growth maybe, even though there's no reason for it. It's just kind of out of the blue and out of nowhere, but I'll take it, I guess. He ends it with saying, I will always want to cause her pain, but I find no satisfaction in her misery. The part that I thought was hot. He literally gets on his knees and crawls to her. And this is going to be a side thing. Is it Powerless? I think it's Powerless by Elsie Silver in the Chestnut Spring series. I think it's book number 2. In that book, there's a scene where I think she crawls to him. And then on Goodreads, the comment was quoting that. And then it said, I had to take a lap. And so now anytime I read anything that's like, hey, say that, I'm like, I gotta take a lap. It's so fucking funny. Anyway, I'm all about groveling. I love when someone admits that they're wrong. I love when... Anyway, so he apologizes and he's like begging for forgiveness and stuff. Again, just continuing to recognize how messed up everything that he did was. And he's thinking, I wanted to take all of her broken pieces and fucking shatter them, turn them into dust so she could never be whole again. I realize now how foolish it was when I could take those pieces and give them a home amongst my own. You are good enough, Sawyer. You're nothing like I said you were, and everything I said you weren't. You're strong and brave, and above all else, you're admirable. And I'm like, okay, again, hey, cool. I'm glad we're saying all those things, but I really wish we could have said that without all the abusive stuff first. The abusive stuff wasn't really necessary. It was a little overboard to an unforgivable point, in my opinion. If he was saying all of this and doing all of this and his actions were like a tenth of what they were earlier in the book, I think I could have liked it. He crawls over to her Then the whole thing gets killed for me because she says, I want you to kiss my favorite toe first. I quirk her brow and she lifts her left foot and points to her pinky toe. Kiss it, Enzo. If worshiping you is what you ask, I'd be happy to spend the rest of my life on my knees. I don't forgive you yet, she says quietly. I keep silent, feeling the challenge weaved in her statement. I should have known it wouldn't come so easy. And it only makes me want to dig my knees further into the ground and stay in this place until she allows me to stand. Would you like me to crawl to you, beautiful? I question, gravel aligning my throat. Bow at your feet and find a home beneath you? Or would you like to climb onto my back where I will serve you and take you places at the point of your finger? Would you? She volleys back, lifting off of the table and circling me until she's at my back. I keep still, though I feel her every move, every breath. Would you cater to my every need, no matter what I asked of you? He says, you will need for nothing. And then in Italian, he says, my love, I will give you everything. I am hot. Oh, anyway, they continue to talk, whatever. It's like a bunch of horny shit. In chapter 24, they again wake up to the ghost crying, but this time it's like full on weeping above them, and it is horrifying. And the cries are making Sawyer physically nauseous. They're muffled, but they sound strange, almost like she's trying to scream, but can't. Enzo goes on to tell her more information about his family. Like, this is, I said it earlier, I was kind of out of timing on my story, but this is where he tells her about his dad dying before he was born, and then his mom dropping her off and all this other stuff. And his mom dropped him off in Rome, and then he ended up in Australia because of Sister Caterina. He was kind of not a reject, but he was a very troublesome kid with the nuns, and so they sent him away as soon as they could, basically. And so Sister Caterina took care of him and got him stuff to be able to go to Australia. And then she reveals more information about her life and about her feelings toward Kevin and her parents, and ultimately she apologizes for ruining Enzo's life. Again, I don't know what she did to have such a statement be said, but it ends with them talking about how their family still haunts them, right? Kevin still haunts her. She says, just as your mother haunts you. He says, then maybe we could show each other how to let go, yeah? Oh, okay. In chapter 25, they're still investigating. Like, they're still trying to figure out how to get up to the beacon of the lighthouse. Sawyer kind of realizes, she's like, okay, we're only looking on the second floor for this like third floor access. What if it's on the first floor? And that's how we get up there. And they're like, okay, that's a good idea, but we need to distract Sylvester long enough to go and figure that out. So Sawyer goes and talks to Sylvester, and then Enzo keeps searching for what's going on. And then ultimately, Sylvester ends up like touching her leg, flirting with her more, is talking about talking about her staying with him. She rejects him. And then he's like, oh, well, I'll just turn you into the police then. He's like, yeah, oh, you don't want to stay with me? Oh, you don't want to live with me? Then I guess you're just a little thief whore who I'll just turn into the cops and they'll just get rid of you. She gets sassy back with him. He ends up slapping her across the face and then charges into the other room and gets his shotgun. Comes outside with the shotgun, and then Enzo appears, points the shotgun at Enzo. Bunch of shenanigans ends up happening where she bolts, and she goes to the cave. And then Sylvester is walking Enzo down the stairway into this like secret passage thing that he had opened in the living room floor. And it's like into this crawl space, creepy dungeon room. And Enzo ends up like overpowering Sylvester and shoving him into this crawl space dungeon room and then shutting the latch. And then he goes and runs off to the cave. It escalated very, very quickly. And so then he runs off to the cave to go and get Sawyer. And Sylvester is stuck inside of this lighthouse, right? He's stuck inside of this crawl space room. Okay, so he gets there. He finds Sawyer. They talk about how they're going to kill Sylvester. And then Sawyer's like, hey, can we sleep here tonight? Like, I just want peace. Like, I want to wake up and not look in the lighthouse. Like, I want something to be different for once. He's like, okay, that's fine. And then they end up doing it in the cave. And he brings her to the pool that was in the middle of the cave that we've kind of in passing mentioned once or twice. And Sawyer says that she's worried that he's going to hurt her again like he did on the boat. And he says, yeah, I am. he says, we're going to overwrite your the bad memory that you have. We're going to like recreate it. And this time it's going to be like a good one. It is very, I would say, non-consensual throughout the entirety of this scene that happens, where she's like, hey, I'm not cool with that. I don't like what's happening. He like starts to drown her. And then she's like, hey, no, seriously, I can't breathe. And then he starts to drown her again. And I'm just like, okay. Oh, Jesus Christ. And it's a lot more detailed than that. It's literally like the entire part of that chapter. And then at the very end of it, he's like begging for her forgiveness during the whole thing. And then, you know, he's like expressing his love for her in Italian afterward. He goes on this like entire spiel, like paragraphs in Italian of him admitting his love for her after the fact. And it's very gross. And ultimately, she's like, I'm going to learn Italian one day to know what you said. How do you forgive him? How are we just like cool with what happened? I don't get it. I know we said there was like that one very specific name for the kink of what that is, but like, I don't know. It freaked me out really bad. I did not like how this was portrayed in any freaking way. It was very just scary and bad and not good. I'm trying to find this one thing I wanted to read to you though. Oh yeah. At one point she even says, that's my limit, she squeaks. Then let me take you to a new limit, was his response, as he then drowned her again. After they finish, she whispers that she forgives him afterward. And he says, yet I will never stop asking for it. I will never stop worshiping you. My definition, his definition of worshiping are a lot different. You will be mine until you draw your last breath, Sawyer, and it will be my hand holding you beneath the surface, introducing you to death. What? But only when I am ready to come with you, we will drown together, pretty thief. Okay. This is why I had to do my makeup. I'm not even doing my makeup anymore. This didn't take as much time as I thought it would. Okay, I actually might start doing some other stuff. What else can I do to my face? Do some eyeliner, I don't know. In chapter 27, the next day, Enzo wakes Sawyer up. He's already been to the lighthouse and Sylvester is missing, and Sawyer's back hurts because they slept on the literal rock floor. But they go back to the lighthouse to try and find the beacon. They do a sweep, so they go to the lighthouse, they do a sweep of it. Sylvester's not there, but they do find massive stores of food that Sylvester was hiding from them and lying about, and they also find a bunch of inshore bottles, like, you know, like the meal replacement bottles. There's like a whole pantry full of them, and it's like really weird that he was so adamant about rationing food. And then Enzo has to go outside to get some firewood for the fire that night, and while Sawyer is alone in there, she hears knocking from the ghosts, and she hears chains dragging, and Enzo comes back in, and he's you know, kind of comforting her after her hearing these scary noises, and he's like, I'll fight ghosts if I have to, baby, don't you worry about it. Which again, objectively, pretty fucking hot. And then in chapter 28, Sawyer wakes up in the middle of the night with Enzo like on top of her because the ghosts are beating on their door, like the door to their bedroom. Luckily, they had it shut, and then they put like a wood over it to, you know what I mean, keep it safe in case Sylvester came in. But there's somebody or something, they're assuming the ghosts, just beating the shit out of the door. And Enzo wants to open it, and she's like, no, please don't, please don't. So he doesn't. And then they try to sleep through it, but obviously you can't sleep through that. So in the next morning, they're very, very grumpy at each other and very short. When they open up the door, there are like gouges in the wood. Okay, that's fine. But they have breakfast and coffee, and they begin searching for a way to the third floor. Now they're knocking everywhere on the first floor, trying to find like a hollow point to try to get up to there again. Chapter 29, no luck, no dice, right? It's a couple days, still nothing. They can't find their way to the third floor, but Sawyer wishes that she had more clothing. And at this point, she's like only wearing her bikini top and some shorts or something. And she bumps into Enzo on the way to the bathroom, and he tells her to put clothes on. He's like, I don't want to see that shit. And she gets very, very offended by this. She's like, he's so hot and cold, and he's been so grumpy lately, and now he's just calling me ugly, and it's so fucked up. And eventually she comes downstairs for dinner. Enzo slides some soup over to her. The soup spills over the side, and it burns her. She's like, I'm not even hungry. And when she goes up to leave, he like grabs her hair, pulls her back onto the table, like yanks her down, And he's like, I don't know what you think is happening, but I love you. And I said that because I don't want to be turned on by you. So like, you need to put on more clothes so that I'm just not turned on and always wanting to do stuff with you. Ew. And then they end up doing it on the table, and then the table breaks after the fact, and it's supposed to be funny or quirky or something. And then he says that he loves her again, and she's like, oh my God, I love you too. But then also she's thinking, and she's like, okay, it's time he knows the truth. He can't just love me, I'm a mess. And admits to Enzo that she killed Kevin. That the whole reason that she is on the run is because she killed Kevin, and he was a police officer, so now the police are after her. Chapter 30, a flashback chapter to Kevin abusing her. I'm not reading it, I'll just give you a real light summary. This particular day, he comes home, it is being extra gross, and she ends up stabbing him in the neck, and he bleeds out. And she freaks out and makes a run for it. And that's how she became a fugitive when she was 22. And so she was a fugitive for 6 years before she had left the country. Like, she was just bouncing state to state and doing all this other stuff, trying to stay away from the police. In chapter 31, she's expecting Enzo to be disgusted by this news, to be upset with her in some way. But the only response he has is he's like, man, I wish I was there to praise you for it. Like, you have no reason to feel bad or guilty. Like, he deserved it. Like, you did what you had to do to survive. Like, you're strong. Aww. In the middle of this, they're interrupted. Like, they're in their bedroom and they're interrupted by this banging noise and like the chain noises on the first floor. They rush down there, but when they get down there, there's nobody on the floor. Like, there's nobody there at all. They're like, okay, oh my God, that's a little freaky. So they're looking around trying to figure out what's going on because all the doors are still boarded closed. All the windows, all the doors are still boarded closed. So obviously it's not Sylvester. Like, what the fuck is happening? And they're looking and they see a bookcase that is left ajar. It's angled in such a way that they're like, oh my God, that's the secret passageway. That's how we get up there. They open up the bookshelf. They go up the stairs. There's the beacon. There's the radio. Both work just fine. So she's on the radio trying to call somebody when they hear the noises again. And this time, there's a foot that appears coming down the ladder at the other end of the little room around the beacon. And it is an emaciated young girl who has her mouth stitched closed. She's in a dirty white dress. She has chains on her, and her mouth is literally sewn shut. There's a bunch of really like graphic body horror descriptions beyond that throughout the rest of this book that I will not say. That's enough grossness for me. So she comes down and they're like, holy shit. That explains, hey, P.S. by the way, explains all the Ensure bottles that he had. Because he was like feeding her with a little food tube through the little thing with the thing. Oh my God. Anyway, and they talk to the girl as much as they can. They give her yes, no questions. They find out that it's Casey, that Trinity, her sister, did actually unalive herself, but then Sylvester unalived her mom, and then she's been alive this whole time, but she's just been kept prisoner by her father. Okay. So they're in the middle of like talking to her about all of this, and there's a loud boom noise from downstairs, and Sylvester's back. Enzo goes down there. He's like, hey, you two stay up here. Like, I'll go take care of this. They're a little uncomfortable because they're like, okay, so Casey, like, is she cool, or is she gonna be like defending Sylvester? Like, we really don't know. Sawyer and Casey that are up there while she keeps talking to the radio, and Sawyer's trying to talk to her. All of a sudden, there's like gunshots downstairs. Sylvester calls for Casey. Casey lunges at Sawyer. Sawyer pushes her back and then runs down the stairs. And Sylvester's just sitting on the couch, holding his shotgun and a beer. Sawyer's like, where in the fuck is Enzo? What is happening? He says, don't worry about it. He's not dead. He's just incapacitated right now. Okay. And then he goes on to graphically discuss some of the other horrible things that he did to Casey that I'm not going to talk about, but it's really gross. And he ends up saying how excited Casey is to have Sawyer as a friend, that she's really looking forward to having a playmate. Oh, okay. Okay. And behind her, Casey is there. Casey is standing directly behind Sawyer, and she's trying to spell something on her back. And it's L-A, but she can't tell what Casey is trying to spell on her back. And for the life of me, I don't know either. L-A? I have no idea. Ends up, though, Sawyer kicks Sylvester in the balls. He doubles over, and then she runs into the kitchen to grab a knife. Dude grabs a gun. He like hits her over the face, he tackles her down, she stabs him in the side, and then he punches her and she passes out. Okay? It's very extreme. I get escalated very quickly. In chapter 33, Enzo's perspective, he wakes up and he's in the freaking crawl space pit thing, and under the living room, there's a bunch of graves down there. There's like a bucket with like feces in it. So he's like, oh, okay, so he keeps Casey down here sometimes. And then also he's like killed all sorts of people. Like there's graves everywhere. What the fuck? So he grabs the first aid kit and this other thing and he starts a fire under the like opening of the door. Starts a fire. Sylvester has to come in and set it out. Enzo bum rushes him, tackles him, jumps out, leaves, goes up to Sylvester's bedroom on the second floor, finds Sawyer chained up to Sylvester's bed, gets her free. They go back downstairs. Sylvester's back up. They get in all these like fist fights. He ends up getting the gun back from Enzo, tries to shoot Enzo, and then Casey pushes Enzo out of the way and she gets shot in the chest. Her father shoots her in the chest. She dies in Enzo's arms. Hello? Enzo puts her down. Sylvester comes over. As he's crying over Casey, Enzo takes the gun, heats it over the fire stove until the end of it is hot red, and then jams the hot red barrel of the gun into Sylvester's throat and kills him. What? What the fuck am I reading? As he is dying, Sawyer and Enzo hear somebody calling from the radio up in the beacon room saying that they got their distress message and that they're there to help. Okay, in chapter 34, Sawyer's like, okay, we have to go respond to the radio, like it's here. Enzo's like, dude, it's the Coast Guard. Like if we respond to them and they come here, like you're going to jail. She's like, it's cool, I deserve the punishment. Enzo says, no, hey, how about you pretend to be Trinity? You know, you're Trinity and all this stuff went crazy and it was self-defense on my end and then we'll figure something out. Okay, I guess. That's what they do. Enzo goes on to say, like, I'm happy to lie for you. Like, I'll kill for you. I'll do anything for you, baby. Like, we'll make this work. So after 24 days at Raven's Isle, 24 days at this lighthouse, Sawyer sits in the water and watches as the Coast Guard boat approaches. And she is so happy that this is the last time that she will ever have to pretend to be somebody else. In chapter 35, they're getting medical treatment. And then they also have to go to the police station to get confronted about, I don't know, 2 dead bodies that just showed up on this fucking island. And so she goes on with this whole story of like, yeah, you know, I was my dad's favorite. So me and Casey got treated differently. And that's why, you know, she got the freaking mouth stuff done. And it was just really sad, but we got locked away and blah, 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 blah. Tries to not speak badly about her dad, Sylvester, though, to sell it to the cops that is actually her father. I don't know. They end up believing it, though. And then she also tells them about Sawyer. Sawyer Bennett, she came to the island 5 years ago and she left this unaliving note and then she went out and unalived herself. And in this note, Sawyer had written out her confession and she's like, sorry for taking people's identities and I did kill my brother, but I did it because he SA'd me and detailed his crimes, and then the police take that and send it off to America. I guess as proof that Sawyer's dead. But then also I'm like, I guess there's no DNA with anything. And then also, is she pretending to be an Australian family? Are we going to act like she doesn't have an Australian accent all of a sudden? Or that the daughter of this guy wouldn't have an, I don't know. It was just weird, but the police end up letting her go. They want to hold Enzo back for questioning, but she's like, no, please, Enzo saved me. Like, I want to be with Enzo. And the police are like, hey, honey, like, you should probably go to, like, a women's shelter and get, like, reacclimated to society. And she's like, no, I want to stay with Enzo. So reluctantly, the police are like, okay, I guess, like, if he saved you and if that's how you feel about it, we can't really do anything to stop you. I didn't take notes for these, like, middle chapters, so that's why we're going through them so quickly. In chapter 36, they go home, and Enzo calls it their home, and they're just so excited that they can have this fresh start together. And he's like, I would rather die in the jaws of a shark than abandon you again, Sawyer. Like, I'm not ever leaving you. And Sawyer makes a joke about getting pregnant, even though she doesn't want children. But even just looking at him, he's so hot that maybe she wouldn't mind having children, which I hate, by the way. That makes me want to vomit. That's not a funny joke to me. That's just weird. In chapter 37, Enzo brings Sawyer to the like shark research facility thing that he works at, and he shows her around the place. She gets to meet Troy, his partner, and that's it. It's been one day since she came home, but he's just showing her around. And Enzo is immediately upset at the way that Troy is looking at her. He's like very jealous and like, ugh. But also, I know Troy wouldn't do anything because he knows I'd kill him. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're just going for this like possessive haughty thing. But also, like, you literally just killed 2 people. Oh, I don't really like it when you make threats about killing people anymore. It's a little scary. It's a little scary. Even obviously, like, he didn't kill Casey and like Sylvester deserved it, but you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. In chapter 38, Enzo is swimming with a shark in the enclosure, and he's like holding the fin, and it takes him to the edge of the tank so he can get out. And it's Troy, Sawyer, and the 2 police officers. And the 2 police officers are like, hey, we cleared you. It's been ruled as self-defense. They look over at Sawyer. She says, hey, I don't want you to call me Trinity anymore. I want to be called Sawyer to honor Sawyer Bennett, who came to the island. And they're like, okay, cool. And also, just so you know, we sent that letter to America, and more evidence came out about Kevin abusing multiple young women. And she had no idea that this happened. But she starts to shut down a little bit. Enzo kicks the police out of the facility. He's like, are you okay? She says, no. And Enzo reassures her of like, look, you helped all those girls. Like, what you did was a good thing. Like, you could go to America and maybe even be considered like a hero now. Like, you're not the bad guy that you thought that you were. And, you know, maybe that additional evidence, it never would have came out if you didn't do what you did, or if you didn't write this letter, and if you weren't where you were here now, or some stupid shit, just reassuring her that what she's doing is right in life. I don't know. And then they're like, okay, so if you chose the name Sawyer, like, now, what's your last name gonna be? Essentially, he tells her, he's like, don't worry, I'm picking your last name. Because it's gonna be his, obviously. Obviously. So in chapter 39, it's a month later, and her name is Sawyer, his last name, Vitale, I guess. And she's thinking about how this binds her to him forever. And then he's like, hey, we're going on the boat today. She starts to panic a little bit. She's like, hey, I don't really want to go on a boat, actually. That's actually really horrifying, because the last time I was on a boat and the last time I was on the water was when when all the really, really bad things happened. And he's like, no, it's cool. Like, you need to come out here. They're on their way to go to the boat, and they go by the bus stop. And at the bus stop, it's none other than Simon. And Simon says, hey, missed you, girl. They chit-chat a little bit, and she's like, I'm ready for another stick and poke tattoo. And she wants to get a cactus on her wrist because cacti are resilient. Does it have anything else to do with anything in the story? Was cactus ever mentioned any other time in the story? No. Do I get the significance? No. Is it a self-insert from HD Carlton? Possibly. I don't know. So she's getting this tattoo. Enzo comes over. He's like, who's this guy? She's like, don't worry about him, he's a friend. And then Enzo gets a tattoo, a stick and poke shark on his wrist. Okay, that's fine, I guess. That's fine. And then in the epilogue, they are literally doing it in a shark tank with like sharks biting at the bars of the cage. Get out of the shark cage after they finish doing it in the water, and they're on a new boat, and the new boat is named Thief, or Landra in Italian, Thief in Italian. And she's reminiscing about how Enzo bought the boat and had proposed to her on it, and they got married with Troy and Simon as the witnesses. And then there's jokes about feeding each other to the sharks, like ending each other's lives again. I don't know. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know. Like I said, I cut out a lot in the last couple of chapters because I can't be bothered. This was already a long enough video about just insanity. I just don't get it. And I don't get the hype about it. I don't get why people like this. I don't get how people think he's hot. I just don't get it. Truly, genuinely, I don't get it. Anyway, that's another one for the books. That was Does It Hurt? Oh, which, by the way, he says a couple times, like, during intercourse. That's why. The title is literally about his pinar. I don't know. Anytime I read anything by HD, that's like the only reaction that I can have. But that's that. Another one in the books. Like I said, thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. And I will see you in the next one, as per usual. Like I said, make sure that you vote in the polls on Saturdays. And like, comment, subscribe, You know the drill. I have memberships on this channel now. And then I also have all of my episodes are uploaded on Spotify. So if you would like to watch these videos on Spotify, you're more than welcome to. And then, yeah, like I said, I'll be doing the Duskwalker Bride book next week. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.